Welcome back, G-Traders. This is the latest review of the US stock market by InstaForex. Wall Street is closed today alongside many other exchanges. However, Friday's American trading session will be far from muted, as one of the most important reports on the state of the US economy is published today. Today, stock exchanges in the United States are closed. As a result, the chart of the S&P 500 reflects yesterday's market sentiment. On Thursday, US indexes closed in a positive territory ahead of Easter after significant volatility. The best performing index was NASDAQ, which gained 0.7%. The broader S&P 500 edged up by 0.3%. However, index futures declined in pre-market trading today. This week, the S&P had its worst performance in 4 years, pushing down by negative US data. Several disappointing data releases in the United States, followed by a downwardly revised global economic outlook by the IMF, have increased fears of a possible recession. The International Monetary Fund reported that global economic growth would be around 3%, its worst outlook in the more than 3 decades. Trading on a Good Friday is focused mainly on the FX markets. The main auction is expected to start only after the release of the Non-Farm Payrolls. Furthermore, ahead of this report, the bond market trading today is shortened during the Asian and American sessions. So far, the markets have already received some data on the US economy and the labor market this week. These data releases seem to have alerted investors. Initial jobless claims were mixed, while business activity weakened. The payroll data from the ADP was twice as low as the previous report. About 145,000 jobs were opened compared to 261,000 in the previous month. All this data, along with the job openings falling below the 10 million mark for the first time since July 2021, confirm that the US economy is already taking a beating due to tough financial conditions. The weakening labor market has pushed down US Treasury bond yields, providing support to major tech stocks such as Alphabet and Meta, which advanced by 3.7% and 2.1%. The yield of 10-year amid increased anxiety among traders. US Treasury bonds fell to the lows of 2022 today, reaching 3.3% ahead of the Non-Farm Payrolls release. In March, only 236,000 new jobs were created, falling short of the expected 239,000 increase, and reaching the lowest level since December 2020. However, the Non-Farm Payroll report for February was revised upwards to 326,000 from 311,000. The unemployment rate in the United States also declined, falling to 3.5%. Market participants expected unemployment to reach 3.6%. The labor force participation rate moved up to 62.6%, its highest level since March 2020. Average hourly earnings also declined in March, rising by only 4.2% year-over-year, the lowest increase since June 2021. Month-over-month, salaries edged up in March by 0.3% from 0.2% in February. Let's see how the US dollar performed in these conditions. The Non-Farm Payrolls report came out in line with the expectations and showed that the labor market remains tight. One would expect even weaker and Non-Farm Payrolls data amid the reports on the US economy. Nevertheless, they confirm that the economy is declining. However, it's still early to talk about the recession. Yields of 10-year treasuries jumped by nearly 3.4% and pushed the US dollar a bit higher. Its price against a basket of G6 currencies initially rallied sharply to 102.30 but tumbled to 102.10 after that. The US currency maintained a mild upward momentum, trading within the range of 101.80 and 102.30. The Canadian dollar is gaining some ground amid higher commodity prices this week. On a Friday, WTI soared by 9.2% as OPEC and Russia unexpectedly announced production cuts starting on May 1. Against the US dollar, the Canadian dollar increased to the intraday resistance level of 1.3517 from the support of 1.3483. And yesterday, as seen on the chart, the Loonie was able to hold ground against the US currency, and it made the low of 1.3463. All that happened before the Canadian labor market data came out. Before the US Non-Farm Payrolls report, the USD card pair showed the green numbers. The Loonie a little changed after one of the most important US indicators was released. After a slight drop, the US dollar continued to strengthen against its Canadian counterpart again and managed to soar to 1.3506. Today's US unemployment data is important primarily as an indicator of the Fed's future rate hikes. The next Fed meeting will be held only in early May. At the same time, the Bank of Canada has very little time to decide on the monetary policy's future. The regulator is expected to announce its decision on the rate on April 12, and most likely after the central bank refrained from rate hikes at the end of January. The Central Bank of Canada is likely to keep their rates unchanged. At least the Canadian regulator can conduct a more hawkish monetary policy. According to yesterday's report, the labor market expanded to 35,000, almost 3 times higher than forecasted, and the GDP added nearly 2.5%. The US labor market demonstrated weaker performance, so it's unlikely to have a significant influence on the Central Bank of Canada's decision. Continuing to move near $28,000 after the release of non-farm payrolls, the Bitcoin price showed wider fluctuations on the chart. On the one hand, a decline in the labor market and other important economic indicators in the United States could be the beginning of a recession. Thus, the flagship cryptocurrency may try to become a safe haven asset. And reportedly, big crypto enthusiast and MicroStrategy founder Michael Saylor bought 1,045 bitcoins, bringing his crypto stocks to 140,000. However, this news did not lead to a bullish momentum. Notably, the US dollar is not going to give up its position. In addition, the crypto market is quite turbulent, and either sticking will only intensify this turmoil. Therefore, BTC is unlikely to reach 30,000 until better times. Today, Bitcoin was trading below this level within the range of 27,779 and $28,102. And you have watched a recap of the North American session. We hope that you are completing a gainful trading week. Our team wishes you a happy Easter and a sunny and warm long weekend. See you next week on the InstaForex TV channel.